All right, welcome to the session on using PowerView. My name is Sean Boone. I'm a program manager on the SQL Server reporting services team. And today what we're going to look at is PowerView, which is a new application from the SQL Server reporting services team. We're going to make sure that you understand everything you need to use in order to be successful with the application. We're also going to cover a lot of the vision and design principles associated with PowerView. And then we're going to do a series of end-to-end demos showcasing both PowerPivot and PowerView, with the focus being in PowerPivot around the things that you need to do in order to be successful with your PowerView reports. And our goal is to really cover all of the areas of the functionality of the product, and then we will wrap up. So in terms of session objectives, we want to make sure that you have a full understanding of the PowerView experience and its positioning within the Microsoft BI stack. And again, to really understand everything that you need in order to build compelling reports from PowerPivot all the way through to PowerView. And then key takeaways that we want to make sure everyone walks away with is that PowerView is a new reporting services offering, and that these reports are designed for the screen, and that really getting the most out of PowerView requires an understanding of a few things. It requires an understanding of PowerPivot and some of the model settings that are available there, as well as DAX. As a consumer of the application, you don't always need to know a lot of this additional capability that's there in terms of how it was set. But for people who are Power users and who are authoring the models that are going to be used by people using PowerView, it will definitely be worth knowing all of these sets of capabilities that are there in PowerView. And then lastly, we hope that you see that PowerView is just really fun to use, and a lot of that is due to the fact that it's just a very smart application, and we designed it to be very simple. So with that, we'll move into what is PowerView. This is PowerView's mission statement, and that it is a interactive data exploration and visual presentation experience. And the emphasis here is around interactive and visual. And so we're going to be doing a lot of exploration of data and showing you a lot of interactivity that is available in the product today. So when we set out to build PowerView, we came up with a set of UI design principles, and these guide every single feature that we have in the product. And I'm just going to talk to a few of these before we roll into some demos. The first is that there's one way to do things, and what we mean by that is that anytime that there's a piece of functionality in the product that we surface, we didn't want to introduce multiple ways for you to do it, and that's very different from what we have in some of our other reporting offerings around reporting services. And that if there's a way that you can actually do something, but it might be kind of hard, there might be 3 or 4 different ways that you could do it. So what we did in PowerView is we said, look, if there's functionality that's going to be available, we want it to be easy, and we want it to be one way to do it. And that's really associated too as well with the 2 clicks to return on investment pillar, which is that everything in PowerView we really want to be super quick to get to. So I'll show you some sorting examples later on that are 1 click away. All of the interactivity is 1 click away, and at most you really have 2 clicks that you need to make in order to actually accomplish something in the product. One thing that you'll notice about PowerView is that everything happens on the canvas. That's where the data goes, and that is where you interact with the data. And you're always interacting with all of the data on the canvas, which is very different from reporting services, Report Builder, and the BI Development Studio product, where in most cases you're operating on metadata and working with fields. Whereas in PowerView, you're actually working with the data. I want to speak really quickly to the next to last bullet point here, which is easy for the user and hard on us. And what that means is there's lots of places in the applications where, where we have some default behavior, some interactivity that's there, and all of that interactivity. There's a lot of code that goes into creating that experience. There's a lot of logic that goes on about ensuring that we do the right thing when you click on certain things. And so we did all of that to make the experience really easy for you so that you don't actually have to set those things up. And I'll walk through several examples of what that looks like. All right. So when we talk about Power View and how do we position it to our other reporting services offerings, there's a couple of key differentiating features. If you look at Report Builder and BI Development Studio, those products are designed for pixel-perfect type reporting, and we give you a lot of capability. You can put a chart where you want to put it, you can put a table where you want to put it, and you can set all sorts of properties to make the controls look the way that you want to do. And that's a workflow typically where the user sits down and has a very clear understanding of what it is they want to build. They want to build a specific report, and we give you a lot of control in order to do that. Power View, on the other hand, is designed for a very different set of scenarios where you may just open up and work with the data, answer a question, and possibly not even save the output. And so we want the experience in Power View to be very fluid when you're working with the data and not having to set a lot of properties as you're working with the data. And then we want you to be able to present that. For example, you'll see later inside PowerPoint where you can take a Power View report and effectively export it to PowerPoint and then interact with it with live interactivity. But it's a very different workflow, one where the focus is on interacting and gaining insights, and not something that scenarios where you know exactly what it is you want to build up front, and you just need to sit down and work through setting all the widgets the way you want to on the screen. And so we've optimized it for the interactivity and the representation of data. So where does it sit? Where does Power View sit with regards to the entire set of scenarios that we're looking at with SQL Server 2012? If you look at our interactive, our insight scenarios, if you're familiar with Excel and PowerPivot, that's where we have enabled a set of self-service analysis capabilities, where you can mash up data, and we store that data inside our Excel in-memory data engine. And then on top of that, that's where Power View comes into play, where once you have the data in PowerPivot, you can then have this sort of interactive, rich metadata-driven experience that's very visual, and again, it's designed for the screen. And then when you're done, both with PowerPivot and Power View, you can store all of those assets in SharePoint. You can create alerts from published reports that are up there. You can collaborate on the insights that you find. But we really use SharePoint as that place that everything comes together for you to collaborate with others. So when we look at 2012 Power View, there's three sort of high-level points that we'll drill into as we go through the demonstrations, but that really sort of guide the overall experience of the product. The first is that it's a very highly visual design experience. It's online, it's on the web, it's in the browser, and we're using familiar Microsoft Office design patterns. So you'll see the ribbon that's available there. Everything that we do in Power View is really based on the rich metadata that we have in the app available to us in the application, and that really comes from PowerPivot and the BI semantic models that come from the analysis services tabular databases. And once users have taken the time to declare how their data is related and the types of data that are there, we're really able to use that in our experience in order to build really great interactive scenarios that do not require the end user to actually set up how all of that works. It just works out of the box, and it's very easy to use. And then lastly, we want it to be presentation ready at all times. So one thing that you'll notice in the application is that there's really never a state where you're building a report and it's in a not done state. So what we've done is, you create a chart. The chart is 100% done. There's not too many cases where you're left with something that you actually have to do more work on in order to actually go ahead and present it. So. All right, so with that, I'm going to flip out here and do some demos. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context for the data that we're working with here. You'll notice that I'm starting here in PowerPivot, and what we're looking at is a set of data that represents airline flights from 2009. This is all publicly available data that you can download from the web, from the government. And what I've done is, you can see here, I've got 6.4 million records in the application, in my PowerPivot workbook. And I've done a few things, like I've created a measure here for on-time percentage, which will tell me what percentage of flights were on time. I have a bunch of other related tables, things like distance groups. And there's a couple things that I want to point out here in this experience that are going to have an impact on what is displayed in PowerView. The first thing you'll notice here is I have a table for distance groups, which just tells us how far these flights actually were in the air. And you'll notice here that when I show this in PowerView, I probably want these to come back in a certain order from the least amount to the most amount. But the text, if I just sort on text, I'm not actually going to get that in the correct order, because of the sort would be based on alphabetical versus the actual way I want it sorted. So there's a feature here in PowerView where you can say sort by column, and I already have it set. And you can say I want to sort it by the distance group order by, and then that way when we show that data in PowerView, it'll come back in that order correctly. I've done the same thing for months. You can see I have a month order by column here. And of course, if I want to hide this column, I can just go here and right click and say hide from client tools, and so then you won't actually see the month order by field in the application. One more thing I want to call out before we switch over to PowerView is I have a set of images associated with my model that represent the airline carriers. And what I have here is just an external image. And if I go into the Design tab inside PowerPivot, go into Advanced, and we'll look at this. I have it checked to be an image URL. And so that will that'll be important for us as we move forward. You'll also notice that I have a default image set on that same field, and that will actually impact the PowerView experience as well. Now there may be a couple additional settings that we'll see, and we'll flip back if we need to cover those as we go through the PowerView demo. But I want to go ahead now and head into SharePoint and work on the PowerView demo. So hold on a second here. Current view. All right, so here we are in the PowerPivot gallery, and there's some things here. If you've been using one of the CTP builds or one of the release candidates, you'll notice some different behavior that we've added in the product since then. And that is that here in SharePoint in the PowerPivot gallery, in addition to my PowerPivot workbooks, I actually have PowerView reports stored in the same place, and you get these nice thumbnails that are represented here. So you can see that you have the PowerView content right next to your PowerPivot workbooks. Okay. Now, if I want to create a new report, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that really quick, I'm going to click on this workbook and say Create PowerView Report. that's going to actually launch the PowerView experience. And we'll just take a few minutes to get acquainted with the application area here before we dive into some examples with the data. So you'll notice here we're in the browser, and we have a very office look and feel, if you will. So up here at the top, I've got the ribbon. I can switch here between different tabs. We have different things available to us in the ribbon. I'm going to go ahead and open up the filter area right away. This is the area where you'll be able to filter the data as we work with it. I'm going to go ahead and open it up here and leave it in view. Over here on the right, we have the Model Explorer, which shows you all of the tables associated with our model, all of our entities, if you will. The fact, if you want to call fact table, is right here. It's called on-time performance, and that has all 6.4 million flights in it, as well as some aggregated data associated with it. And so to get started, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and click on a field here. Let's say I'm interested in weather delay data. So I'll come down to a field here that I have calculated called weather delay percentage. That was an actual calculation that I set up in the model. And go ahead and actually collapse the filters area for the moment. Give us some more room. There we go. And I'm going to give this report a title really quick and call it Weather Delays. Okay. And I want to look at this by month. So I'm going to go ahead and expand the month entity here and click on month name. Now you'll notice that right away the data just gets added to the canvas. I didn't have to actually interact with the field well here. I just clicked on the field itself. I'll show you that there's another way that you can actually add data to the canvas, which is relatively new. If I get rid of the month name and then just drag it into the actual visual itself, we'll actually place it in the next available position in the visualization. So here I can see that I have a total of 1.18% of all flights were delayed by weather. If I want to turn the totals off, I can do that as well. There's a ability here to just do that one click away. And you notice again that the months came back in order, right? And that is because of the way that we made that setting in the model that I showed you previously. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I want to convert this to a line chart. Right? I'm interested in seeing this data over time. A line chart makes good sense. So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to a line. And notice that we didn't create a copy of the table and then create a chart next to it. We actually are working with that same exact grouping structure of data. And now I'm able to see my data as a line chart. And if I want to switch it to a column chart, I just come up to the visualization gallery and click on column chart, and I've got a column chart. Relatively easy. Same thing for bar chart if I so choose. But I'm going to keep it as a line chart. And I'm interested in a couple things here. The first is that I have a couple of spikes associated with the winter months, which makes sense, January and December. But there's also some spikes here in the middle of the, in the June, May, July time frame. And as a user, I might think that maybe that has to do with thunderstorms, for example. And I know a little bit about thunderstorms. I know that they happen in the afternoon hours typically. So I actually have that information in my model. So I can go look at time of day. And again, I'm just going to drag in AM or PM. I could just click on it, but I'm going to go ahead and just drag it into the visual. And you'll see that we just put it in the next natural place that we could put in the visual. So I have some blank data here. I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to open up the filter pane. Notice right here at the top of the visual, we have a spot where you can bring the filter pane into view. And there's two things that I want to call out about the filter pane here. The first being that you can switch between the view, which is the entire view, this one, this effectively this one screen, and the chart itself. So we have both the ability to filter a specific data region, as well as the ability to filter the entire view. Okay. So for the time being, I'm just going to filter this specific chart. And I want to get rid of the blank values, so I'm going to go ahead here and remove the blank values just by unchecking it. But I'll show you a couple of other of the filters here. I have a month name, so I can pick a different month if I want to. I can filter that down. I can also use a numeric slider here for the weather delay percentage. And so we'll spend some more time with filters in a little bit, but just wanted to give you an idea of the types of things that are available here. All right, so here we are. We're looking at weather delays by month, again, AM or PM, and you'll notice that there's a pretty big discrepancy in the PM months. If I go ahead and click on the legend here, I can highlight that data and see it, but there's definitely a very big difference between AM and PM in the months around June and July, and you notice that it's not as big during the winter months, and that is probably because storms in the winter aren't really dependent on the heating that occurs with the afternoon thunderstorms. So I want to investigate this further because I know that some states are likely to have have thunderstorms more than other states. And so again, I'll go and look at origin states. This is where all the flights are, the state that the flight originates from. And I'm going to go ahead and just click a checkbox here, and again, it's going to update the visual. There we go. And what you'll notice that we did here is we actually broke that chart into what we call multiples. And you can actually see now very easily, if I scroll this display, some different patterns. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sort this using the area that we have right above the visualization that we call the floaty, that enables me to actually do that with just a single click. So I'm going to sort these by origin state, and then I'm going to sort them by weather delay percentage. Notice that was just a couple clicks. And now what's happened is we've actually sorted these actual charts by the total weather delay percentage for that state. Right, and so you can see West Virginia has the worst weather delay percentage. But the other thing you'll notice here is that there tends to be two types of, a couple different types of overall trends. So Illinois has this sort of double hockey stick type view, which is repeated in other places. And then you have ones like Florida and Colorado, where again, you'll notice this huge discrepancy between the PM and the AM hours. And that's really what these multiple displays are all about. It's about immediately what happens is our eyes are trained to actually notice these differences and pick them out, right? So you can really quickly see that Florida jumps out at you. And a couple things you can do here if you want to change the overall number of items in the display. You can just go to the grid setting here and say I want to see 5 by 5, and then you can go ahead and scroll those. It's just very easy to do that. And again, notice that down here by Puerto Rico, they don't have that many delays, and as you scroll up, you start to see more of the states that have weather delays. So that's just one example of the different types of charting capabilities that we have in the product. I want to move on to a section where we focus on the interactive capabilities that are in the product that occur between visualizations. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new view. And this is something that is new if you were using previous CTPs, for example. I'll go ahead and create a new view. Right, so now I've got two views inside my report. I'll go ahead and collapse that down real quick. And we're going to look at a couple of different variables. We're going to take a look at the number of flights by distance groups and by state. And what that will do is it'll allow us to showcase some of the interactivity that occurs between visualizations. So I'm going to start here and grab the total number of flights. Total number of flights, and we'll look at it by distance group. We'll start with distance group. I'm going to go ahead and reorder these fields really quick, and I'm going to turn this into a column chart. Okay, there you go. So now I can see that there's a a large set of flights that occur less than 250 miles, some more flights that occur less than 500 miles. But again, notice that the data is all ordered here correctly, and that goes back to that setting that we made in the PowerPivot workbook to ensure that the data would be ordered that way. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that, leave that as such. If you want to, you can actually sort the data here really quick. If I want to sort it descending or ascending, I can do that as well. I can sort it by the total number of flights really quick. But I'm going to go ahead and leave this by distance group ascending. But just notice that that was all one click away. So I have distance group here. I want to add another visualization on the screen, and to do that I'm just going to copy and paste. So we do have copy and paste capability. I used Control-C and Control-V. You can absolutely use the ribbon commands that we have for copy and paste as well. All right. Go ahead and do that. Okay. And on this bottom visualization, I actually want to look at the airline carriers themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and change the axis here to airline name. Okay. Now remember, everything that we have here is related in the model. And again, if I want to sort these, I can see the total number of flights by carrier. Southwest appears to be the most prevalent carrier during 2009 with the most flights. Now watch what happens here when I select one of these options from one of these columns from the upper chart. So I click on less than 250 miles. And what happens in the bottom visual is that we actually highlight partially the data that is associated with the less than 250 miles for each carrier, right? So you can see that Southwest has a good chunk, SkyWest has a good chunk, but Hawaiian Airlines has a really big chunk of their flights apparently are all less than 250 miles. And that kind of makes sense. You'll notice here if I click on, and it works both ways. So if I unselect this and then select Hawaiian Airlines, maybe I'm interested in that a little bit more. What I can see here is a couple things. Hawaiian Airlines flies some flights within the 250 mile range, but they don't fly anything from there on until you get to about 2,200 miles. And that makes a lot of sense because you're either flying within the island space that's there in Hawaii, or you're flying, across the Pacific Ocean, right? So in that case, you're going to be flying much further, and hopefully you're not flying in this range here and landing because you would be, landing in water. But that's just to show you that there is the ability to highlight the data between visualizations in a very easy way. Notice I didn't have to set anything up to make that work in the PowerView experience. It just works automatically. And it does more. So let me show you another example here where if I take, for example, look at this data by day of week, let's say. So I'll go in here. Actually, we'll do time of day. So I'll grab AM or PM and add that to the visualization, right? So this is the total number of flights, AM or PM, by distance group, by time of day. And you'll notice if I click on this portion of this chart, which represents flights 250 to 499 miles, I see that percentage reflected in the bottom chart below. And if I click, for example, on Southwest, you'll see that it partially highlights each of the stacks in the upper chart here, so you can see how Southwest works. And so when we talk about easy for the user, hard on us, and that PowerView is a very smart application, these are the types of things that we're talking about where the user doesn't have to set anything up, but the product just sort of works for them and does things that they would expect it to do. I can also select here from the legend PM. It'll highlight all the PM segments as well as the data in the bottom chart below. And there's one more feature that we added post one of the CTPs for cases where you have non-additive data. So let's say I'm looking at, again, this bottom chart, and instead of looking at the total number of flights, let's say I look at weather percentage again, right? So weather delays. I'll go ahead and take, actually let's do on-time percentage. So the on-time percentage just tells us, if a flight was on time or not, what percentage of those there were, okay? And, obviously this data is not additive in nature. It goes up to 70%. If I were to slice this data differently, I would see, not just partials, but actually different values. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select, let's say, PM. Okay, and you can see again we partially highlight, but let's just say I take one of these chunks like 250,000 miles or greater, and you'll notice what happens here that some of the values are bigger and some of the values are smaller than the previous value. So what we do is we actually shrink in the highlighted value so that you can still see the previous value behind it, right? And again, that's one of those things where we've done a lot of work in the product to make that possible, but it's super easy for you to use. You didn't have to set up an expression or anything to try to figure out, when should I make the bars bigger or wider or thinner. All of this stuff just works out of the box for you, and it's very easy for you to work with. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple other quick features here before we move to another piece of functionality related for how you can lay data out, which we call tiles. And that is, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one really quick. We have the ability to do slicers on the actual canvas here. So I'm going to go up here to airline carriers, and I'm going to grab the image for the airline, and you'll see that we have all of them available to us right here on the screen. And if I pick Northwest Airlines, I can see should filter the data here. Hold on here. Hold on. Oh, sorry, I need to turn it into a slicer first. There we go. That previous visual was just a table. So if I click on Northwest Airlines, the data will update. Same thing with Southwest, right? So it's just a nice way to sort of interact with the data. It is true that people identify with images quicker than actually reading text. And most people are familiar with these logos. If you just click on United Airlines, it's very easy to work with. All right, I'm going to go ahead and create a copy of this view, duplicate it, show you some of the new additional functionalities that we got here. I'm going to go ahead and grab the airline image again. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to create a container that we refer to as tiles. I'm just going to do that by dragging the airline image up to the tile by area. Okay, and you'll notice here that I have a couple of blue lines, and everything between those blue lines is effectively inside that container. Okay, and again, I can cycle through these images. And what I'll do now is add some visualizations to here so you can see how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and grab distance group again, put it onto the canvas, okay, and go ahead and take a look at the total number of flights. And I'll go ahead and turn this into a column chart. And maybe I want to go ahead and put an image inside here as well. So I'll go ahead and grab the airline image again. Maybe I want to put some data associated with it, like weather delay, total number of flights. There we go. And we have a visual that we have in the product that's called a card. And what I'll do here is take this table and turn it into a card. All right, there we go. And I actually want to add the name of the airline carrier as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add the airline name. There we go. There we go. Now, previously when we were over in Power View, one of the things that you might remember is that there was a default label set for the airline. I'll go ahead and show that to you again really quick here. So go to airline carriers, table behavior, and you'll notice that the default label is set to airline name and the default image is set to the airline image. And when I go ahead and click back here, you'll notice that what happens as a result, we use that default image over here on the left side of the card, and we use that default name, that default label as the title for the card. Now, one of the things that we've added post one of the release candidates is the ability to create what we call a call-out card. And that's what you use when you want something to really stand out. It really helps the data pop. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one on here like that. So now you get these nice big metrics on the page that you can work with as you sort of scroll through your data. And what will happen here is, watch what happens as I click on these fields, right? So I clicked on AirTran, I clicked on Alaska Airlines, and I can see how that data changes as I flip through these tiles. Okay. Now, one of the things that you'll notice as I work through those tiles there is that not all of the carriers have the same number of columns. And that might be okay. Maybe that's what I want, particularly for cases where I'm really just interested in the distribution for that particular carrier, and I'm not so much interested in doing comparisons across all of the carriers. I just want to be able to concentrate on one carrier. But what if I wanted to actually kind of make some comparisons with the other carriers? And one way I could do that is with the multiples display that I showed you earlier. But another way to do that is here in the tiles, we can actually force these charts to have the same axes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the chart, and then I'm going to go up to the ribbon, and you'll see here that we have a chunk of the ribbon that's called Synchronize. And I'm going to go ahead and take the look at the axis and say I want to use the same axis for the horizontal axis to be the same across all the tiles. So I click on that. Now, because this particular airline happened to fly all of those distance groups, nothing really changed on the screen. But watch what happens when I click over to Hawaiian Airlines again. You'll notice that the data is actually empty for many of those distance groups, but they still show up in the chart. So now as I flip through here, I can kind of, make some comparisons as I kind of work through the data. And we didn't just do this for, the horizontal axis. You can do the same with the y-axis here. So I'll go up again to the ribbon under the axis and say use the same vertical axis for all tiles. Right? And so notice that all the data kind of jumped down because Frontier is not a very large carrier. Again, Hawaiian Airlines probably not a large carrier either. But if I scroll over to Southwest, right? Go all the way over to Southwest here, right? You see that they have they're the largest carrier in the U.S. with 1.1 million flights. Now, for this whole tile container that we're working with, one of the things that you can do is you can change the style. So here I have it on a tab strip style, but I can change it to what we call a cover flow, right? So down here at the bottom, I can just sort of cycle through these in a different way using that traditional cover flow behavior. I'm going to go ahead and switch it back. You'll notice that it will switch back to the tab strip view. But again, notice here that everything has been really one click away, very easy to do, and that you can really change the shape of these visuals on the fly. If I want to change this to a table, maybe I'm not happy with it being a chart, I just click on, I just clicked on matrix in this case, and now I have a matrix visualization. If I want to resize that matrix, I can just double click on the edges and it automatically resizes itself. If I want to turn it back into a column chart, I just click on column chart, and I've got my column chart. Go ahead and resize it. So again, it's just designed for you to be able to really interact with the data very quickly. I want to show you a couple things related to the filter pane, a couple of interesting behaviors here. Go ahead and expand it. All right. Move this guy off. There we go. We'll go back to the chart. So one of the things, so here we go, I can filter by the total number of flights. Right. Go. It's going to filter the chart. In this case, there wasn't any data associated with it. But if I want to filter this by a month, for example, which is a field that's actually not in this visual, all I have to do is go grab the month field, move it to the filter pane, and then I can pick September if I want to, right? And that will only show me data for September. Now it's showing me data for September and August. And we have some more advanced filters on the back of the card. So if I want to go to the advanced filter mode, I simply just click right here. And now I can actually change it so that I can say it contains or does not contain or starts with. If I just want everything that starts with January, I can do that as well. Right, so it's just very easy to create these filters. We've given you a lot of room to work with when you create those filters. All right, let's see here really quick. I want to show you the date functionality as well that we have. So I'm going to create another filter here. Go to the back of the card. And you'll notice that because it's a date, we show you a different filter, which is sort of gives you the calendar picker capability. So I can go all the way back to, for example, 2009 and say all flights is on or after January 1st, 2009, which happens to be what my data represents. I hit apply filter, and it could filter the data. If I want to change it, let's say to all data after July 1st, I can do that as well. And again, that field is not actually in the visualization, but I'm able to filter by that and use a nice calendar control in order to do that. All right. Now, of course, when you're done with your report, one of the things that you may want to do is actually share that with other people. And so we have the ability here to actually export this to PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Say save and export. Go. And I'll call this FAA Report 2. It's in the localhost PowerPivot. Let's see here. Yep. Save. Okay. And let's see here. Call it FAA. Go. All right, so now it's on the desktop, and I should be able to just go ahead and click on this report. Notice that it opens up with an image view of each of those slides, or sorry, views that we had. And I go ahead and go into presentation mode. Give it a minute here. And when I go into presentation mode, there's a little area down here in the bottom right that says click to interact. And when I click on that, it's actually going to give you the full interactive capability that you had in the browser inside PowerPoint. So we'll give it just a second here to load up. And again, I can have all the interactivity that I had before. If I go page up, I go to the next slide, go here, go, click to interact here again. Second here. There we go. All the data's there. I still have the highlighting capabilities that were available on the visualizations before. So now you can create these really great interactive presentations. It also works with all of the regular PowerPoint capabilities. So if I want to resize this, and maybe put, go to design and give it a theme, I can do that as well. So it works with all the PowerPoint capabilities that are there so that I can create a presentation. Go ahead and close out of that. I want to show you one other report that we worked on, and this is a report. It's based on demographic data for countries. Some of you might be familiar with an organization called Gapminder that does these really great presentations of data with Hans Rosling. And we've enabled similar functionality here in PowerView. So what I'm going to do is look at population statistics. I've already got this report built, but what it does is it shows you some of the animated scatter and bubble chart capabilities that we have in the product. So I'm going to go ahead and let this load up. I'll go ahead and put it in edit mode. There we go. And what we're looking at here is the on the bottom axis is the number of males per 100 females in the population. And so you can see typically what would you expect is that there would be an even number, and that number would be 100 to 100, if all other things being equal. And then over on the left here, we have the average of the median age, which will obviously change over time if you have good health care, for example. And this data set here, I'm going to go ahead and select this visual, is going all the way back to 1950, which is not too long after World War II, all the way to projected data in 2050. And I just wanted to point out a few countries here and walk through some of the trends associated with the data. So, for example, let's take a look at Germany. Okay, and you can see what happens with Germany since World War II. I just selected the point, and we can play it through time, and you'll get these nice trails. And there's a few things that we can see here, and that is sort of after the war ended, we noticed that the population began to even out closer to a one-to-one relationship between men and women, and that makes a lot of sense because people weren't off in war fighting, men weren't off in war fighting, and so they came home, they had children, the children were likely, just as likely to be male or female, and so that started to improve that demographic ratio between those two countries, between those two sexes. So you just go ahead and play that through time. And again, you can kind of see that the median age is going up as well. And that's just a sign of, again, people are not, young people aren't being killed in the war. They also have access to better health care over time. And so those populations tend to age, and the median age tends to rise. Another one that's interesting to look at is Russia. And so you can see here Russia has a very different look to it than Germany, and yet Russia was another participant in World War II. But what's interesting about Russia is that the data has a curve in it around 1990, 1995, where there's a demographic tragedy that effectively impacts males. And so we can see that the data starts to curve back the other direction to where there's more women in the population versus females in the population. There's more women versus men. And there's a lot of theories that are associated. Demographers have looked at this data and they've tried to make understand what happened in this time frame, and it is associated with the time where the Soviet Union dissolved, and there is a belief among the demographic community and the academics that look at this and say that that there was it's likely due, or at least partially due to high alcoholism rates in men and in Russia. And it's you can look at this data and it's fairly amazing. This type of trend is on the order of the impact that World War II had as well, right? So something as dire as that is had just as much of an impact as World War II. So those are the demos. Let's see here. Flip back really quick, and I'll show you one more report. A couple other reports that we have here. I have a completed FAA report that I'll just show you really quick. So go ahead and click on it. The other thing too is when you click on a specific view inside of the PowerPivot gallery, one of the things that we do is we actually launch the report on that screen. So once you pick one of those tiles, we open up the application in that spot. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in edit mode really quick. See all the slides that I have here. And again, we have all the interactivity. This is just looking at number of flights by airline. You'll see how that contributes over here on the left. I've got a card in the call-out form here that allows you to see the average of the minutes delayed by the carrier, right? So just some really nice interactivity here. This is the same report that we looked at earlier in finished mode. There we go. And then this is weather delays by state and month. This is another scatter chart with a play axis, so I can see how California does over time by the month. And I can look at Illinois, and Illinois, you can see, for example, has really high rate of weather delays in the winter. It evens out during the rest of the months and then skyrockets again in December, and that makes sense. But it's very different than California, for example, that doesn't really have that many weather delays at all. And I can again see that with the play axis that we have here on the chart. So very easy to do, very easy to set up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and flip back out to the presentation. All right, so now that we've seen all that, I just want to return and talk about what PowerView is and more importantly also what it is not. So as we saw, PowerView is a very interactive data exploration and visual presentation experience. But PowerView is not a replacement for Report Builder 2.0, Report Builder 3.0, or the BI Development Studio. And hopefully you've been able to see how those applications are different compared to PowerView throughout the demonstrations there. You know, PowerView was very much, I was able to just interact with the data on the fly and filter it, you know, and interact with it in lots of interesting ways. Whereas with Report Builder, you know, you put something on the screen in a specific location and you set all the properties, and if you decide you don't want a chart, you have to delete it and turn it into a table. So it's a very publishing centric type of workflow in Report Builder, and that's very different than the experience that we just showed there with PowerView. It's also not a high-end analysis experience, right? So you'll notice that inside PowerView there was no complex calculation building for the user. That was all sort of done in PowerPivot. Now you can change the aggregates that the user is looking at in PowerView from like a sum to a count, but it's not designed to sort of be this place where you go and you build these really complex calculations. And again, it's also not a cell-based calculation tool. Very clearly it's different than what you see with an Excel grid where you can type in formulas and see the results. And it's also not a replacement for performance point scorecards or clarity. You know, performance point, the scorecarding technology that's there, again, is really about you're building something on the screen in a very specific way. You want a lot of options for the items that are on the screen, and so there's a lot of setup involved in order to do those types of things. And again, in PowerView, you saw how everything was just very simple to click on and interact with, and it's more of a an interactive data exploration experience versus a publishing experience, if you will. So I walked through a lot of different features. Some of those were not available in some of the earlier release builds, the CDPs of whatnot. And I'm not going to go through all the features that I showed you again, but I just want to be able to have a slide here for you to reference them as you start to learn the application. So we saw the general canvas and the ribbon and the application infrastructure, all the different chart types that we have, the motion charts, the small multiples, the presentation mode with interactivity. We looked at sorting. We did not look at show all. That's a feature where if you, for example, have a table and some of the items in that table or in that matrix, if you will, are not present in certain groups, you have the option right in the UI to actually show items with no data. And in fact, I think what I'll do is I'll just jump out really quick and show that to you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this into a matrix really quick. So again, we're looking at month name. I'm going to change this to distance group. go. And I'll look at this by airline carriers. And I'm going to remove the AM or PM and change this to flight counts. Okay, so now I'm looking at the total number of flights by distance group by each airline name. And what you'll notice as I scroll down here, it's again things like Hawaiian Airlines only has a few entries, whereas the larger carriers that fly everywhere have more entries. But there are lots of cases where the user will want to be able to have all of the items, even for each of the carriers. So what I can do here is I can just click distance group, show items with no data, and now all of the carriers have all of the same distance group. So it just gives me some nice symmetry in the data. When I'm scrolling it, I can see where there are holes and where there are gaps. And so it's a nice feature for people for some specific scenarios. Okay. A couple of other things we've done to the product since the earlier CTPs is we've made it possible for you to open up reports after there have been some significant model changes underneath. In cases where the visualizations might be impacted by those model changes, we gray those visuals out, but we still make it possible for you to load the report and then sort of reauthor and fix those items and make them work again. We also have the ability to treat some measures as non-measures, and the flip, which is to take non-measures and treat them as measures. So what to do next? We encourage you to go out to the PowerView TechNet Wiki. We have lots of links and videos and training exercises there to learn more about PowerView. There has also been a recent white paper published on DAX. It's called Learn DAX in 30 Minutes, and it has a great workbook that shows lots of different examples of how to use DAX. And so if you're somebody who is authoring PowerPivot workbooks and wants to know how to create some great calculations, I would certainly encourage you to go out and take a look at those videos as well as the content associated with it. Also for blogs, we've got the Reporting Services Team blog. That is where members of our team are actively blogging and letting you know about different features in the product, different news that we have related to reporting services. So we encourage you to check that out. The data that I showed you today, I have all of that data saved in a PowerPivot workbook that you can download via this link here. And then we also have a set of public-facing demos on the One-Click Business Intelligence site. So if you search for One-Click Business Intelligence, you'll see a set of public-facing PowerView demos, and you can just go try those out. And then lastly, if you have questions or you just want to talk about PowerView on Twitter, we have a few hashtags that we use when we talk about Microsoft BI and PowerView and PowerPivot in general. So we encourage you to go and be a part of the conversation there. So with that, I want to thank you for listening and watching the demos, and we'll hope you enjoy using PowerView in your organization. Thank you very much.